The suffering does not end when the sentence escapes you. It begins when the air changes and your body realizes you cannot pull those words back into your throat. Your mind becomes a rewind machine and a punishment chamber at the same time, replaying the same moment as if pain could somehow edit it. That is why one careless phrase can haunt an entire night. You are not only ashamed of the sound, you are shaken by the version of yourself it revealed. And if you do not understand what happens in the next breath, regret stops being a lesson and becomes an identity. Buddha never offered a fantasy where you erase speech after the fact. He pointed somewhere harsher and far more freeing. A word is only the final spark of a fire that was already burning in the mind. In preserved teachings on right speech, what matters is not merely whether a statement carries truth. It also matters whether it helps, whether it belongs to that moment, and whether it comes from clarity instead of inner violence. So the cure does not begin with your mouth alone. It begins where the impulse first puts on a mask and calls itself necessary. And here is the immediate solution most people resist because it feels too simple to save them. When regret hits, do not rush to explain, defend, soften, justify, or drown the other person in frantic honesty. Your first task is to stop the inner wildfire exactly where it wants to become another sentence. Close the mouth, feel the heat, let the panic scratch at your ribs for a second, and refuse to hand it a microphone. Because the first damage may have been one reckless phrase, but the lasting damage is usually the 10 terrified phrases that come after it. The cruelest part is that the worst harm is often not the first sentence. It is the chain reaction that begins when shame turns into speed, and speed turns into verbal debris. You see their face change, your stomach drops, and suddenly, you are not speaking to understand anything anymore. You are speaking to escape the pain of seeing yourself through their eyes. That is why so much regret is not born from malice alone, but from an inability to survive 1 second of silence after the mistake. So write this in the comments and make it a vow instead of decoration. I will stop before I wound, because the mouth is seldom the first weapon. Usually the first weapon is the panic that rises when you sense you have crossed a line and cannot bear what that says about you. The moment you learn to interrupt that panic, your life begins to change in places no one else can even see. In preserved teachings, Buddha points to a ruthless kind of honesty. Look before the act, look during the act, look after the act. That destroys the excuse people love most, the one that says, "It already happened, so now I may as well keep going." No, not always. Many times the harm is still unfolding while you keep feeding it with tone, volume, sarcasm, and desperate self-protection. The immediate path is not to become wise in 10 seconds, it is to become still in 1. Pay attention to what actually collapses inside you after you speak without thinking. It is not only concern for the other person. Very often it is horror at the image of yourself that just stepped into the room, petty, childish, cruel, needy, exposed. So you start performing repair when you are not ready to repair anything. You are just trying to outrun the mirror, and nobody runs well while carrying that much shame. That is why your first responsibility in regret is not eloquence. It is restraint. Do not send the extra voice note, the paragraph-long explanation, the late-night essay, the "let me just clarify one thing" message that is really 5 hidden defenses in a trench coat. Do not demand instant absolution just because you cannot tolerate the weight of your own mistake for more than 30 seconds. A lot of what people call sincerity is only panic wearing the costume of openness. And this is where one of the most dangerous lies enters. You tell yourself you were just being honest, as if honesty automatically becomes wisdom the moment it feels intense. But intensity is not purity. Pain does not make your speech more sacred. Often, it only makes your tongue faster and sharper. There are truths that can be spoken cleanly later, and there are impulses that dress themselves up as truth because they are desperate to be released. So when the wave rises, use the body before you trust the story in the mind. Seal the lips for a beat. Let the exhale leave slower than your urge. Then name, without poetry and without excuse, what is moving through you. Anger, shame, fear, jealousy, humiliation. Hurry. The moment you name the force, you loosen its grip just enough to keep it from driving straight through someone else. Then comes a cut that hurts, but saves you. Separate real damage from wounded ego. Not every clumsy sentence shattered a heart. Sometimes what is crushing you is the fact that you looked foolish, immature, insecure, too eager, too cold, too hungry for control. And if you cannot tell the difference, you will turn a human mistake into a life sentence against yourself. Buddha did not teach guilt as an identity. He taught clear seeing, and clear seeing means knowing whether you hurt a person or merely bruised your self-image. If there was real harm, then repair must be clean, not slippery, not dramatic, not clever. Say the simple adult thing. I spoke badly. That hurt you. I see it. I regret it. No, if you took it that way. No, but I was upset. No hidden attempt to smuggle your innocence back into the room. Real repair is brief because it is honest, and honest people do not decorate accountability to escape it. When regret is fresh, you really only need 3 clean exits. Silence, when anything more would add poison. Recognition, when a short acknowledgement is the most truthful thing in the room. And repair, when the moment calls for direct responsibility instead of emotional smoke. What ruins people is that they keep inventing a 4th exit called control, where they try to manage how quickly the other person forgives them. Think about the exact scenes that keep returning to you. The message sent after midnight because you felt ignored and wanted to force a reaction. The sharp reply to your mother when she arrived at the wrong second and inherited the stress of your entire week. The joke in front of other people that made you feel powerful for 2 seconds and ashamed for 2 months. The cold sentence to someone you loved because being tender felt riskier than being cruel. None of those moments started in the mouth. They started in a feeling you did not want to feel. Rejection, helplessness, envy, exhaustion, smallness, the terror of not being chosen, the ache of not being understood. So the sentence became a shield, but it was a shield with a blade, and even when it protected you for a heartbeat, it cut the space around you and left blood where connection could have been. Then the scene ends, but the violence does not. You keep repeating it in your head, rehearsing smarter replies, inventing better versions of yourself, cross-examining every word like suffering itself is a form of wisdom. It is not. Reflection is not self-torture with better vocabulary. Reflection asks, what ruled me there, exactly? What was I unwilling to feel? At what second could I have stopped? What will I do differently next time? Sometimes the regret is not even about hurting someone. Sometimes it is about revealing the hunger you were trying so hard to hide. You talked too much because you wanted reassurance. You turned harsh because you felt small, mocked because you were uncomfortable, performed distance because closeness made you feel exposed. And afterward, the real sting was this. Your sentence exposed a need you were ashamed to admit you had. There is another place this teaching becomes brutal and beautiful. When someone speaks to you with venom, the urge to return it arrives like a physical command. Your jaw tightens, your body heats, and a perfect sentence appears, polished by hurt and begging to be unleashed. But Buddha's discipline of speech is not passive weakness. It is the refusal to let another person's confusion borrow your mouth and speak through it. And your body always warns you before disaster if you learn to read it. Your breath gets shorter. Your face hardens. You stop listening and start building a case. The moment conversation becomes a courtroom, you are trying to win. Create a private ritual. Relax the shoulders. Touch the tongue to the roof of the mouth. Take 3 breaths. Look at one still object and come back. Do not wait for the next explosion to wish you had discipline. Train in ordinary hours. Answer messages without frenzy. Do not send important words at the peak of emotion. And do not use sarcasm to smuggle what you are too afraid to say plainly, these small acts look unimpressive, but they build the invisible space between feeling and speaking, and that space is where freedom lives. The deeper fear beneath all this may be even more unsettling. Maybe you are not only afraid of regretting what you said, maybe you are afraid of discovering how often your life is steered by temporary states that speak with the authority of a king. 1 hour, it is anger wearing your face. Another hour, it is bruised pride, loneliness, envy, or the starving need to be approved. Each one reaches for your voice as if it has the right to use it, and most people never realize how often they hand over the throne. That is why the aftermath feels so strange. Some part of you knows it was not your whole being that spoke. It was a fragment, the tired part, the scared part, the wounded child, the proud animal, the abandoned lover. The work is not to pretend those parts do not exist. The work is to stop seating them on the throne every time they enter the room, as if the loudest pain deserves the highest authority. And the root is often older than the conversation that exposed it. A reckless sentence usually carries sediment, fatigue you denied, resentment you swallowed, humiliations you never processed, pressures you kept naming fine because stopping felt inconvenient. Then one ordinary spark touches the pile, and suddenly the now gets blamed for a fire the now did not create by itself. That is why treating every regret like an isolated accident keeps you trapped in repetition. There is a reason silence feels unbearable to you after you have said something reckless. Silence removes every costume. It does not let you hide behind momentum. It forces you to stand in the naked fact that you were overtaken, and the ego would rather keep talking than be seen without armor. But the ability to stop mid-sentence, to let your pride bleed without feeding it another word, is one of the cleanest forms of strength a person can learn. Not everything that rises inside you deserves sound the moment it rises. Some truths are immature when they first appear. Some insights arrive contaminated by resentment. Some observations may be factually correct and still spiritually ugly in the way they are delivered. Right speech is not censorship, it is reverence for consequence, the maturity to ask not only, is this true, but also, who will I become if I speak from this state right now? Be careful with the private theater of guilt too. There is a kind of remorse that looks humble, but is secretly self-obsession. It keeps returning to the scene not to learn, but to protect the fantasy that you should have been flawless. That is still ego. A quieter, stronger repentance admits the wrong, repairs what can be repaired, and then trains the nervous system so the same fire has less fuel next time. Because words do not only wound in dramatic moments, they reshape homes, friendships, marriages, teams, and the way children remember your face. One impulsive sentence may pass, a pattern becomes climate, and people do not leave only because of a single blow. Often they leave because they grew tired of living near weather that turns every room into a place where they must brace themselves. So give yourself a sentence for the edge, a bridge you can use when heat rises and wisdom feels far away. Say, internally, not now, or this is pain speaking, or I can be truthful without becoming cruel. You are not betraying yourself when you delay an impulsive reaction. You are protecting reality from a temporary storm that wants permanent consequences. And remember this with all the seriousness it deserves. The goal is not to become mute, soft, or fake. The goal is to become so inwardly stable that your speech stops being hijacked by every passing wound. Then your words can carry weight without carrying poison. Then apology becomes rarer because violence becomes rarer. Then regret loses its throne, and your mouth no longer serves whatever chaos happened to arrive first. This is why Buddha's teaching on speech is not etiquette, it is liberation. A person who cannot govern the leap between feeling and speaking will keep burning bridges and calling the ashes fate. A person who learns to see the mind before the mouth becomes dangerous only to illusion, not to the people they love. And once you taste that kind of mastery, even one clean second of silence can feel like a miracle. So the next time regret arrives, do not worship it and do not run from it. Stop. See what is burning. Refuse the second wound. Then choose with precision, silence, acknowledgement, or repair, and let that moment become the day your speech stopped belonging to your pain.